Now I'm going to solder up the circuit. I prefer to do it without the rails in place on the base. It doesn't really matter, but it's a little bit easier to handle the base without the rails in place. So I'm doing it before I've stuck those down. When you come to the solder of the motor, the tabs on the back of the motor are in quite soft plastic, and so if you hang about with a big soldering iron too long, or apply too much heat to these, the back of the motor casing might start to melt. So do this last of all. Use a fine tipped soldering iron and put the solder on quite quickly. Don't take a long time over that joint. Probably best to do the switch first, at least then you can get in practice at doing your solder joints. If you're not very familiar with soldering, you might be best to just take any couple of bits of wire and practice soldering before you come to make the model. So to solder to the switch, I've used a little dot of blue tack to hold the switch in place, another dot of blue tack to hold the wire. I've put the wire through the little hole in the base of the switch contact. Now first of all, clean up the soldering iron and get a little dot of solder on it. So you should see a dot of solder on the end of your soldering iron. Touch that against the tab of the switch and just feed a little bit of extra solder on. It shouldn't really take very long to do. Give it a second to cool down and then just check by pulling that it's a strong joint. Okay, so I'll do the same on the other side of the switch. It doesn't matter which way round the motor is finally connected to the circuit, because the motor can run in either direction and that's absolutely fine. The steps will still feed the balls even if it turns the opposite direction. Okay, I'm cheating a little bit because that tab's previously been soldered, so I can't put the wire through. Give it a second to cool down and then just check that it really is soldered. Okay, that's good. So I've soldered the switch in. I now need to put the two wires through the little hole in the back of the base plate. In fact, I've done this in slightly the wrong order. I ought to also put the motor in place, ready to be soldered. Let's do that first. Just push it in place so that its front is nice and flush with the base. Right, now we can feed the two wires through. It's important to do all these things in the right order. So solder the switch in, get two ends. It doesn't matter if you've got a red and a black end rather than two black ends, either will do. Whoops. Well, let's do one at a time. Okay, so again, feed the wire through the hole in the tab on the motor. In fact, that's going to stay in place of its own accord, I think. Don't need any blue tack on it. And I can't really show you this very easily. Maybe I can if I prop the model up. Yep. So now be very careful to make sure my soldering iron is clean and has got a little dot of solder on it. It's not going to take any heat at all to heat that tab up, so it'll solder really quite quickly. Put a dot of solder on the soldering iron. I've got a dot on there, nearly. Right. And very carefully go in and just feed the solder and the soldering iron in. Okay, have I done it? Yes. And take the second wire feed it through. If you can. There we go. Pop it through the hole in the tab on the motor, again if you can. That really isn't going to go through. I'm just twisting the ends to get them nicely together. There we go. And again, I'll prop it up so you can maybe see. Right, this way round. There we go. Again, be very careful to get the soldering iron scrupulously clean and get a dot of solder onto the end of it. These really don't need a lot of soldering because they're quite fine. Just go in and put a little dot on. There we go. As soon as you see the solder flow onto it, just pull the soldering iron away. And there we go. Right, having done that, the next thing is to put the switch through the hole in the base plate. Just take the nut and the washer off. This washer's got a little bent tab. Put it facing towards the switch, otherwise the switch won't sit very happily. And put the switch into the model with the with its two tabs away from the front of the model. That way you'll get your on-off in the right directions. So the two tabs on the switch, I'll show you in a second. There we go. The two tabs are away from the front of the model. Pop the anti-shake washer on and the nut. And just maybe gently tighten it up with a pair of pliers while you hold the switch so it doesn't swing round. Okay, so that's our electrics all sorted out, and you can pop some batteries in and put the base on. You always leave the bottom of the base loose so you can get in there to replace the batteries. And when you've done yours, you'll be able to check the electrics by switching it on, seeing that the motor drives. Okay.